Good evening and thank you for joining us. This is live with Faye. I do know that you're giving up your IPL match to catch the show, but this is an important show, so thank you for joining us. We've had a lot of conversations about the agriculture sector, about the plight of farmers, and also specifically about the farm bills or the new laws that the government brought in the last session of Parliament. What we haven't had, quite honestly, is the voices from the ground. And I'm very glad that there is one organization that's bringing us a feel of the voices from the ground, and that is Gaon Connection. Gaon Connection actually does something they call the Rural Report, and they brought out now the second Rural Report, and some of the findings are really interesting, which is why we thought it should be brought to your notice. You can, of course, find Gaon Connection online and download their Rural Report from their website and take a look at it. But in the meantime, let me just give you the gist of what it has said so far. Now, it interestingly finds that 2/3 of the farmers they spoke to from across the country were aware of the protests that were taking place, because of the farm bills, out of which almost half of them said that is because the laws are anti-farmer. But taking a closer look at the numbers that Gaon Connection has put out in this report, 67% of the farmers they spoke to were aware of the new bills. 52% were against the new bills. So more than half said that they were against the new bills. But interestingly, and this is what I find interesting, 36% were unaware of the details in those bills that they happen to be opposing. Also, out of the 35% of those who said that they were for the bills and they supported those bills, 17% were not aware of the details within that bill or within the bills that have been passed. And this is an interesting, that we want to be able to unpack this a little more and understand what this tells us about what's going on the ground. So that's the discussion we're having today. It's going to be a quick discussion. Joining us right now, Nidhi Jamwal is the Deputy Managing Editor of Gaon Connection, and she's also the person who authored the report. And we're very happy to have her with us. She's going to explain to us their research methodology and what the understanding was on the ground. Avik Saha, who is the National Convenor of the Kisan Andolan, always very articulate about farmer issues, joins us as well. So does Bhupinder Singh. He's the General Secretary of the Punjab Youth Wing, BKU, Rajewal. Thank you so much for joining us, all three of you. Nidhi, if I may please start with you. Would you first tell us how many farmers were spoken to for this survey and across what regions and over what period of time?
Yeah, so basically, what we did was, this is a rapid survey, which I want to clarify. The first survey that we did was a much exhaustive and a national survey that we had done. This survey we did with the farmers. We have interviewed about 5,022 farmers across 53 districts in 16 states. So what we did for the survey was that we basically divided the country into 5 agri-climatic zones, which are already there, because we know that farming depends a lot also on the climate zones and the kind of crops that are grown over there. So we picked up 16 states, and we've looked at 5 zones, which is the north, northwest, east, west, south, and east also covers northeast. We also looked at Assam. So that's basically what was our sample size and the states that we have covered. And this survey, which is a face-to-face survey, was done between October 3rd and October 9th. So this is for a week. We have our own ground level people who went and met farmers, and there was a proper methodology and a study design which was prepared by the data analysts who work with us. And so based on that, we've gone ahead and done this rapid survey and released the findings.
Right. And could you give us a little bit of an idea of what this means? 52% said that they were against the new farm laws, of which 36% were unaware of the details. So what level of details were you testing at this point for them to be aware of?
So if you see the title of our report and our survey is also the perception of Indian farmer, because our whole idea was we are not really saying this is fact and that's whatever wrong, but we are just looking at how do the farmers perceive these 3 acts and what is their understanding. So we found that 52%, every second farmer of those 5,022 that we have interviewed was not, was against when we asked them that do you support or oppose or are indifferent towards these three laws which have come into place. So every second farmer told us that they were opposed. But later on, when we've also asked them other questions and we've analyzed the data, we figured that within those 52%, 36% were not aware of the details of these laws, because we've also asked farmers specific questions on each of these three laws. So, if you see the overall awareness, if you see about the three laws is only 67%. But when I am looking at 52% opposing and 35% supporting, it is way beyond 67% who are actually aware of all the three laws put together. So that's what it shows, that almost 36% of 52% who oppose were not aware of the details of the law. Similarly, of the 35% who were supporting these laws, almost 16%, half of them are actually unaware of the details of this law, and which is what the survey shows, that there is a lack of information about the laws with the farmers in the ground.
And I'll come back to the other details, but very well put. Thank you so much for articulating that so clearly. Let me take this now to Avik. Avik, and I'm sure that given the amount of information you consume every day on farmer issues, I'm sure you've taken a look at this new survey by Gaon Connection. Is this what you have found as well? Because I know that you are traveling a great deal. You're speaking to farmers on the ground. Is it challenging to help farmers understand what's in these bills?
Yes, indeed it is. But I want to first start by congratulating Nidhi and the entire Gaon Connection team. What a fantastic report. And this is where farmers' movements and rural issues need to go, in a space where people understand and talk data.
Yes.
A couple of things are very, very interesting from my perspective, and I'm sorry I don't have the latitude of neutrality that Nidhi does. But I am also looking at data from the pure data perspective. What does the data tell me? It could tell me I'm completely wrong. So I am being academic to that extent. And what do I see? I see the report telling me that these laws have come out to fix a problem that perhaps does not exist. Putting it simply, are these laws solutions looking for a problem? Because the report says that 63% of the surveyed farmers have sold at MSP. I'm a little skeptical. It could be, 53%. In any event, the whole myth of 6% farmers getting MSP stands busted, which is very important. If so many farmers are selling at MSP, Faye, then why the others are not being able to sell at MSP should have been the government's focus of lawmaking. Instead, these laws want to dismantle the system where they are getting MSP. That's one very interesting thing. The other interesting thing is for the opposers and the supporters. 1/3 of the supporters apparently don't know what they are supporting. But more than half of the opposers, those who are in favor of the law, half of them do not know what they are in favor of. While I say this, we have to keep in mind that this law is just about 3 weeks old, and we have had COVID and we have had movement restrictions. So the government is sending out its machinery, and the political party at the center is trying to propagate the good points of the law, and the farmers' organizations are working to explain the law. So that could explain perhaps to Nidhi and her team why there is still so much ignorance. Because frankly, the time has been very short. But one more interesting fact that I notice is that, again, the law supposes that the open market and purchase by companies is the solution that will help farmers realize price. But the survey tells you that nationally, only 16% farmers are using these avenues for sale. And in the two major MSP getting areas, and surprisingly, yes, South India is selling more at MSP than Punjab and Haryana, 78%, while Punjab and Haryana are 75%. Now, there, 78% farmers want to go to the Sarkari Mandi, as the report calls it, to sell. So the preference is known, and this is the preference survey. The preference is known, the current position is known, and yet these laws postulate a future where these two givens are missing. This is what comes out, stares back at the report to me, and I want to draw the government's attention to this, Faye, that look, this is the situation, this is what the farmers want, please hear them, and this is what the reality is. Consider these two and then go back to the drawing board. There's no problem. So many laws are amended. During the lockdown, we had 50 circulars coming out from the Home Ministry in 55 days. So please keep changing. Please see the reality and move accordingly. That's what the report should tell the lawmakers, the government. And for us activists, yes, we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of communication. And these laws certainly need to change. And as you know, Faye, that Punjab Punjab Assembly has today passed some laws or are still debating, I'm not very sure. And those situations are also emerging. But one thing is very clear, that the farmers' movement, no matter how you look at it, even if it's in terms of statistics, is actually growing because the understanding is dawning. To answer you last, Faye, the government has made these laws in imagination of a future. We are opposing these laws in imagination of a future. So both sides are talking about the future. And to be absolutely sure about the future is a fool's pleasure. We can't do that. However, we can base the future on certain parameters like this survey that is available to us. And that's what needs to be done, Faye.
Right. A quick question also now to Bhupinder Singh, who is the General Secretary, Punjab Youth Wing of the BKU, Rajewal. Bhupinder Singh हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए बहुत धन्यवाद. क्या आप बता सकते हैं कि अवीक साहा जी ने अभी समझाया और निधि जी ने अभी समझाया कि एमएसपी को लेके अभी जो प्रोटेस्ट हो रहे हैं, क्या आपको लग रहा है कि अगर सरकार ने ये तय की कि ये सारे नए कानून के साथ सबको एमएसपी हम प्रॉमिस करेंगे कि अगर आप प्राइवेट के साथ भी आप अपने प्रोड्यूस को भेजेंगे तो आपको एमएसपी प्राइवेट सेक्टर से भी मिलेगा, क्या is this really the mudda? Will the problem be solved a lot if MSP is just guaranteed to everybody?
मैम, सबसे पहले तो मैं धन्यवाद कहना चाहता हूं गांव मोर्चा कनेक्शन की पूरी टीम को, जिन्होंने इतना बढ़िया सर्वे हमारे सामने लेकर आए और इतनी मेहनत की, किसानों के इश्यू के लिए इतना मेहनत किया। तो सेकेंडरी मैं कहना चाहूंगा, अब लॉ बन गए हैं जो पहले ऑर्डिनेंस थे। अगर इतने ही बढ़िया होते, यूपी में आज पैडी की कीमत 800-900 रुपये नहीं होती। यूपी बिहार में आज पैडी की ये कंडीशन है, 800-900 रुपए वहां पर बिक रहा है। वहां से व्यापारी खरीद के पंजाब में एमएसपी पे, जहाँ एमएसपी से 100-200 कम व्यापारी को आगे बेच रहे हैं। अगर लॉ तो यहीं आके डिसमिस हो गया, जहाँ फेल हो गया, इनका फेलियर, सबसे बड़ा फेलियर 1 महीने के अंदर अंदर ही सामने आ गया कि लॉ पास होने के बावजूद भी इतनी दुर्दशा हो रही है यूपी बिहार में। तो ये एक मॉडल सामने आ गया अपने भी, ये बिल्कुल फेल लॉ है। जो पंजाब की पोजीशन है, पंजाब का किसान इस टाइम पूरी एजुटेशन के लिए तैयार है और बैठा हुआ है। पंजाब की पोजीशन इस टाइम ये है, लड़ो या मरो, लड़ेंगे या मरेंगे। जो नहीं लड़ेंगे तब भी मरेंगे, तो लड़के मरेंगे, क्योंकि पंजाब के लिए जो लाइफलाइन है, पंजाब के लिए एमएसपी मंडी सिस्टम, ये ही पंजाब का एक समाधान है। इससे बिना पंजाब का एक भी दिन सर्वाइवल नहीं हो सकता, क्योंकि प्राइवेट प्लेयर तो कहीं भी मॉडल सामने है यूपी बिहार, वही पंजाब का हाल होगा अगर जहां पर ये इंप्लीमेंट हो गया तो। इसलिए पंजाब की सरकार ने भी आज विधानसभा में डिटेल्स अभी आनी बाकी है, किए हैं जो मते, वो उसका कितना असर रहता है नहीं रहता है वो आने वाले अगली वीट के सीजन में पता चल जाएगा। बाकी आज की डेट में ये लॉज बिल्कुल ही
अब वही एक सवाल आज हमारे दर्शक से भूपेंद्र सिंह जी, उनका कहना है कि क्या ये जो नए कानून लेके आए, क्या उसका अभी कोई इम्पैक्ट आया कि
जी
अभी रुकना पड़ेगा, कि इज देयर एनी इम्पैक्ट ऑन द ग्राउंड राइट नाउ फ्रॉम दीज लॉज ऑलरेडी?
इम्पैक्ट तो आ गया मैडम। यूपी में पिछली साल पैडी की रेट थे 1400-1500 रुपए, इस बार हो गया 800-900 रुपये, क्योंकि खुला छोड़ दिया, बिल्कुल ही गवर्नमेंट निकल गई, कारपोरेट के हवाले कर दिया। पंजाब में भी दिखने लगा है इस बार, पंजाब में पैडी की इतनी दुर्दशा हो रही है जितनी अभी पिछले 10-20 साल में हमने कभी अपने आप जिंदगी में नहीं देखी, क्योंकि उसका इम्पैक्ट तो धीरे धीरे, अभी तो कानून लागू हुआ नहीं पंजाब में तो बेसिकली, पर उसके बैड रिजल्ट अभी दिखने लग गए हैं कि दुर्दशा होनी शुरू हो गई है पैडी की पंजाब में भी।
Right, and I want to just bring in Nidhi, if I may, for our audience is just joining us. Nidhi Jamwal is the Deputy Managing Director of Gaon
जी जी
Connection, which is an organization that very beautifully does news from the ground in rural India, first of all, and also does a report called the Rural Report on a regular basis. Nidhi, if I may ask you a broader question now, outside of just the farm bills. What has your report, the two reports that you put out so far, showed us in terms of the impact of the lockdown on our farm sector for individual farmers and the distress that we saw building among farmers over the last 3-4 years?
I think for the first report that we did, the Rural Report 1, that was basically on the impact of COVID-19 on rural India. And we looked at different sectors, not just farmers. Farming community was one of the community that we looked at. We've also looked at what's happening to pregnant women in rural India. Because often we see, the only time we really talk about rural India is only when the migrant workers were walking from cities to villages. But what happened to them after they reached villages, nobody bothered to find out. And that's where Gaon Connection stepped in, and we decided to find out that, okay, after people are coming back and otherwise people who are living in rural India, how are they dealing with it? So as far as farming community is concerned, the impact was huge in the initial months, because that's also was the time that a lot of farmers were actually going to harvest their Rabi crop, the winter crop, because it is 25th of March, the country went into a nationwide lockdown. And also that's also the time when the Kharif starts coming, the monsoon has to come in and the Kharif has to begin. So almost like, I might miss a few percentages either and there, but almost half the farmers were not able to, harvest their crops. Almost half the farmers were not able to sow their Kharif crops. And I think almost 1/3 or more than that were not even able to sell whatever they had harvested. So whatever was harvested was just lying with them, because there was no, transportation was all shut. There was no way for them to take it to the mandis or to the private traders to sell their produce. So I think the impact was huge, much beyond just the farming community, because we also looked at what's happening to pregnant women, because they were not able to access the regular, checkup. They were not vaccinated. They were not getting their regular medicines. Children in Anganwadi shut. Children were not getting their meals. So I think the real impact of COVID we are going to see in the coming several months or possibly years, if I may say so.
Right, we have a question from Aman Peshawari, who says the government should focus on compensation for farmers due to climate change and COVID. How will the changing system help farmers? Avik, if you don't mind answering that question for us. Obviously, there is an impact of climate change. In Maharashtra, where I'm speaking from, we've had crops that are severely damaged in Sholapur, in Kolhapur, in the surrounding areas, sugarcane, paddy, which was standing crop in the fields that have received unseasonal rain. This is obviously climate change. But how far away are we from compensation for farmers for this sort of crop damage?
Faye, climate change is a very large issue, and it's one thing on which we cannot hold any particular government completely responsible and liable. But there is contributory negligence from almost all governments. However, the problem, why there is this disbelief in the current farm laws, is because this government is a half-start government. There are huge announcements, a lot of fanfare, and then all of a sudden, the circus has left town. And this has happened with the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, which was supposed to have been a mitigation for crop loss. You see, this year, even Gujarat did not implement that Fasal Bima Yojana. And the Prime Minister went on prime time and said that this is the silver bullet. After this, even if you don't sow your crops, you will receive compensation, and I'll take care of all the things. So climate change is an emerging and mushrooming reality for farmers. and the mitigation of that, the compensation and anything else that can somewhat mitigate it, is slowly leaving the ground. So I think climate change will impact farmers much, much more because the government doesn't even have a plan for it. And these laws, of course, have nothing to do with climate change and compensation. So overall, the fear is that if the government is leaving the field, that security net that the government is supposed to create for the largest segment of the population, then where do we stand? And that fear of the unknown is maybe one of the reasons why the protests are growing. And the government has not been able to...
Mr. Saha, my question was this. We do know, of course, that there is crop insurance that the government has offered farmers and that there is compensation which needs to come through that crop insurance. My question to you is, and also the one that the audience is asking is, given the damage that was done by the lockdown and then by unseasonal rain, is there adequate compensation being given to farmers right now?
Oh, certainly not. Compensation before Fasal Bima Yojana was a government obligation. We would regularly do Andolan for compensation. That compensation was replaced by the Fasal Bima Yojana. Now the Fasal Bima Yojana is gone. And the farmers moving around asking, who do I get this compensation from? So yes, there is a grave crisis. And this is the reason why there is so much disbelief in the operations of the government and the intention of the government.
Also a question to Mr. Bhupinder Singh. आपसे ये सवाल पूछ रही थी कि अगर सरकार अभी आप लोगों की बात नहीं माने तो आप क्या करने वाले?
जी, पंजाब में तो मैडम ऑलरेडी एजिटेशन चल रही है। इसके बावजूद कि खरीफ का सीजन बहुत पीक पे है, पंजाब का कोई भी किसान इस टाइम वक्त निकाल पालना बहुत ही मुश्किल है, क्योंकि कटाई और आगे वीट की स्वयं करनी बहुत जरूरी है। वो पीक पे चल रहा है हमारा सीजन। तो इसके बावजूद भी पंजाब का किसान, पंजाब में आज 155 प्लेसेस पर नाके लगाकर पेट्रोल पंप पे, ट्रेन की पटरी पे, रोड पे, टोल प्लाजा पे 155 नाका आज पंजाब की चल रहे हैं। इतने संघर्ष के लिए पंजाब का किसान आज भी निकला हुआ है। तो इसके बावजूद अगर नहीं कुछ सरकार मानती तो 15 दिन के बाद बजाई करके किसान जब बेला टाइम निकलेगा तो एजुकेशन बहुत तीखी हो जाएगी। और परमात्मा के आगे अरदास है कि जे वायलेट ना हो। सबसे बड़ी उपलब्धि इस एजुकेशन की ये है कि आज तक एक भी किसान ने सरकारी प्रॉपर्टी का एक भी फूल भी नहीं तोड़ा और एक पत्ता बाका नहीं किया। 25 दिन से एजुकेशन चल रही है। सबसे बड़ी उपलब्धि ये है, शांतमय और पीसफुली एजुकेशन चल रही है। और इसको आगे 15 दिन के बाद बहुत ज्यादा रोज है पंजाब के किसान में, टाइम मिलने पर पूरा सड़क पे, रोड पे आ जाएगा। पंजाब का किसान पीछे हटने वाला
जी। और भूपेंद्र सिंह जी, मैं इस अपॉर्चुनिटी के इस्तेमाल करके आपसे एक और सवाल पूछना चाहती हूँ। वो आपने कहा कि अभी कटाई की सीजन चल रही है और हमें पता है कि स्टबल बर्निंग की भी काफी ऐसे रिपोर्ट्स आ रहे हैं पंजाब से, हरियाणा से, और दिल्ली में, चंडीगढ़ में हमने देखा है कि प्रदूषण बढ़ रही है, कि एयर क्वालिटी और खराब होती जा रही है। क्या आप हमें बता सकते हैं कि स्टेट गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से आपको स्टबल बर्निंग की सुविधा कुछ मिले है, कि आपको मशीन्स मिले, आपको कुछ सुविधा मिले है कि आप अवॉइड कर सकते हैं इस सीजन में?
देखो मैडम, जो एनजीटी ने फैसला किया था उसके अकॉर्डिंग पंजाब के फार्मर को जो 2.5 एकड़ तक है उसको पंजाब सरकार ने फ्री मशीनरी प्रोवाइड करवानी थी। जो 5 एकड़ तक है उसको 15,000 लेकर प्रोवाइड करवानी थी। 5 एकड़ से ऊपर 20,000 में प्रोवाइड करानी थी। पंजाब सरकार में सिंगल एक किसान भी नहीं पंजाब में जिसको इसने एनजीटी के हूबहू फैसला लागू करके ऐसी मशीनरी दी हो। सब्सिडी पे थोड़ा 50%, 40% जो 2 लाख की मशीनरी है उस पे कुछ सब्सिडी दे के कुछ मशीनें दी हैं, पर वो भी आज की डेट में कोई भी मशीनरी ऐसी नहीं, या कोई भी इंप्लीमेंट ऐसा नहीं जो स्टबल का निपटारा कर सके, जहां प्रॉपर समाधान कर सके। उसके लिए डीजल 75 रुपीज लीटर आज की डेट में कहां से किसान जला लेगा? 20-50 लीटर एक एकड़ में लगता है। उसकी तो पहली एमएसपी पे फसल है जो बिक रही है, पर वो भी आधे दाम पे बिक रही है। उसकी तो पहली आमदन बहुत कम है, जो ऐसे और खर्चा डीजल का कैसे वो झेल नहीं पाएगा। तो इसलिए प्रॉब्लम है जो गवर्नमेंट ने, पंजाब ने कुछ भी 1 रुपए की भी राहत पंजाब सरकार को नहीं दी। पिछली बार ड्रामा किया, 150-200 रुपए क्विंटल के हिसाब से कुछ बॉक्स बिल फार्मर के अकाउंट में पा दिया, वो भी एनजीटी के प्रेशर में। वो भी सारा बाद में फ्रॉड निकला। तो पोजीशन यही है, किसान के पास कोई सब्सिट्यूट ही नहीं, किसान की मजबूरी है। दूसरी तरफ जावड़ेकर जी ने आपने आप ही पिछले हफ्ते बयान दिया 4% है सिर्फ स्टेबल बर्निंग का जो शेयर है पोल्यूशन में। बाकी 96% जो शेयर है उस पे कभी किसी की डांग नहीं चली। किसान पे हमेशा हर काज किसान पे गिरती है।
Avik sir, you wanted to come in on this point? Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to add on your what the farmers movement next will be. In the next 7-10 days, there will be a very large meeting of farmers organizations. जो भूपिंदर भाई का जो संगठन है BKU Rajewal, वो भी उसमें शामिल होंगे, and a all India solidarity, irrespective of which platform you are, left, right, center, they are coming together, and the nation might see that meeting in the next 10 days. And come November, after this sowing etc. are done, come November, farmers of Punjab have decided that हम जरूरत पड़ने से पंजाब छोड़ के अभी दिल्ली पर डेरा डालेंगे. So the fight, the resistance, the struggle, we are seeing the beginning of it now. Punjab has led the way. Punjab will continue to lead the way, but rest of India is gearing up, and the government is clearly on the back foot and trying to spin a narrative that this is a Punjab Haryana problem, Punjab Haryana की issue है. वो सरकार को कुछ ही दिनों में दिखने को मिल जाएगा. तमिलनाडु से ट्रेन भर भर के जब किसान, महाराष्ट्र से किसान दिल्ली पहुंचेंगे, तो the all India nature of the struggle will become apparent.
Nidhi, is that what you found on the ground as well, that it's likely that this will become an all India struggle, or did you find that a lot of the responses were different from different parts of the country?
It is very different, Faye. It's not as uniform as it seems. Clearly, the protests have been more in the northwest region, and the northwest region for our survey was basically Punjab, Haryana, and Himachal Pradesh. So these are the three states we considered in the northwest region. And what we figured that because a large chunk of farmers in this region sell their crops at MSP, and a large chunk of them, like 75% of them are selling it at MSP, and over 77% sell it at the Sarkari mandis. So possibly that is the reason the protests are so strong in Punjab and Haryana region, is because a lot of them are selling at MSP and at the APMCs. And the fear with these three laws is that eventually these laws will lead to the shutting down of the mandis and the MSP, which is what is also reflected in our survey, that 39% of the respondents said that they fear that the three laws will lead to the shutting down of the mandis, the APMCs, and 39% also said that they fear that the MSP will, the system will collapse in the coming few months or years. So that's what, so it's more centered, protests as of now are more centered in the northwest region, again possibly because of MSP and the mandi system being very strong in that region. If you look at north region, as per our survey, north was Bihar, UP and Uttarakhand, only 26% were selling at MSP. Can you imagine? I mean, the difference from 75% selling at MSP to only 25% of the respondents said that they are selling it at MSP. So maybe that is what explains more anger and fear in the farmers of northwest region, possibly. I mean, maybe others can explain better.
Avik, do you agree?
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to also split the MSP. There are two types of MSP. There is one price, but the two sources of purchase. In Punjab and Haryana, the purchaser is the central government through FCI. And if you look at the south, where more farmers get MSP than Punjab and Haryana, the three states, Kerala, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh are all opposition rule states. And there, the decentralized purchase is done by the state government, which is why there is such a high figure. Because the state government cannot afford not to buy the farmer's produce at MSP and still remain in the state government. The farmer has much quicker access to the government in the south. So therefore, this is the nature, the two natures of MSP. And overall, the MSP that the farmer gets primarily depends on the government's will intent. The central government can tweak the laws because it doesn't feel the heat immediately from the ground. The state governments are much more cautious when dealing with MSP.
Yes.
I just wanted your viewers to understand this little nuance about MSP.
That's very well said. So I want to thank Aman Peshawari and Health Site for giving us support financially. But we have one more question that's coming from one of our viewers. I'd be very glad if you all answer it. The question is that vegetable prices have already started going up very sharply around the country. I know personally in Mumbai we've noticed it go up quite sharply. Is there a connection to what's happening in the farm sector in any way? Are we expecting this to go up? Food price is going to continue to go up. Avik sir, you want to take that question?
Food prices, when they go up in the cities, the governments usually respond quickly and try and stop it. Because if there's one class they are terribly scared of, it's the middle class. That's me and you, Faye. Now, however, today we had a discussion, but we did not bring to the focus of your audience that this is only virtually about cereal crops. The largest segment of agriculture is actually non-cereal crops, vegetables, milk, and other things, which is the shadow of the MSP, where there's no MSP. And that's where the larger beating of farmers takes place. Punjab is not discussing its vegetable crops in winter, and it's a very large producer of vegetable crops. So overall, prices will tend to rise a little, but going forward, I think the governments will manage the prices. But you can take it that an average of 80 rupees a kilo will be the price of almost any vegetable.
All right, we seem to have answered most of our questions, and like I promised our viewers, we're going to continue to take a look at the farm sector on a regular basis. I want to thank our three guests for taking time out and coming and joining us on this conversation. Nidhi and the entire team at Gaon Connection, thank you for the work that you're doing. Very honestly, it is heartening. And to our viewers, check out Gaon Connection on the internet, look at their work. It's really strong work, and support them in ways that it's in any way that you can, really. Avik and Bhupinder Singh, thank you for joining us and answering our questions. To our viewers, enjoy the rest of your IPL match. Thanks for watching.